Aliyah had always moved through the world quietly, not shy, never invisible, but calm, the kind of person who didn't need to announce herself to be present. She lived in Miami now, in a modest apartment near the water, and every morning she woke her 2 children with a soft tap on the door and a voice that carried warmth like sunlight. "Come on, babies. The day is waiting." Malik, 10 years old, was thoughtful and watchful. He noticed everything. And Nia, 8, was pure brightness, curious, wide-eyed, believing the world was full of possibility. Aliyah worked in design, not fashion, not at first, storytelling, fabrics, textures, color combinations, not to impress rich crowds but to make women feel seen. What began as small creations from her kitchen table became something more. Her brand, Amara, started quietly online. No flashy marketing, no influencer deals. Just truth, beauty, and women telling other women, "This outfit felt like it understood me," and it grew. Quiet things do. Now Amara was preparing to expand into boutiques, stores where women could try on clothes without feeling judged, which is why they were here today, inside L'Etoile, a luxury boutique in Brickell, a place known for elegance, whispers, curated exclusivity, and for treating anyone who didn't look wealthy as though they didn't belong. Aliyah had come here before, years ago, when she was younger, struggling, unsure, searching for clothes for a job interview. She had been dismissed, laughed at, treated like her presence was an inconvenience. She walked out that day with nothing but a quiet promise burning inside her. "One day I will build something that sees me." Today she was not here to shop. She was here to finalize a deal. L'Etoile was failing, quietly, discreetly, behind its gold-trimmed doors. Amara was acquiring them, but no one in the building knew that yet. And when Aliyah stepped inside, wearing simple sandals, jeans, and a soft cotton blouse, holding Malik's hand and Nia's, the boutique staff saw not a founder, not a visionary, not the owner of the company their jobs now depended on, but a black woman with 2 kids who didn't belong here. And the air shifted. The smiles became thin, the glances became long, the tone became sweet, but cutting, and Aliyah felt her children notice. Which mattered more than anything else. The bell over the boutique door chimed, soft, delicate, meant to sound expensive. Aliyah stepped inside, holding her children's hands, the warm Miami sun still clinging to their skin. Malik looked around silently, taking everything in. Nia's eyes sparkled at the gold displays and crystal lighting, but the room didn't sparkle back at them. The first sales associate glanced up and paused. Her smile appeared, late, too trained, too thin. "Can we help you?" she asked, her tone gentle in the same way a blade is thin. Aliyah's steps remained calm. "Yes," she said kindly. "We're here to look around." The associate's eyes flicked down, sandals, cotton blouse, no designer logos. Her voice turned sweeter, sharper. "Oh, of course. Just please be careful with the displays. They're very delicate." She looked at the children, her smile tightening. "We don't usually allow little ones to touch things." Nia's hand slipped behind Aliyah's. Malik's jaw clenched. Another associate whispered behind the counter. A glance, a laugh quickly stifled, a look that said everything without words. What is she doing here? Aliyah felt it. She had felt it before. She had learned how to breathe through it, but her children hadn't, and they were watching. She looked down at them, not to silence them, not to shield them, but to ground them. "We belong anywhere we choose to stand," she whispered softly. The boutique didn't know yet, but the floor beneath them was already shifting. "Before we continue, I want to know something real. Where are you watching from? Your city and country? Tell me in the comments, because stories like this one, they travel farther than we think. They reach hearts in places we will never see, and the world feels a little smaller when we say where we are. And also, if you're here, right now, listening, stay until the end. There is a moment in this story that will stay with you. A moment that changes everything. All right, take a breath, let's go on." Brickell was the kind of place where sunlight didn't just shine, it reflected, off steel, off glass, off the windows of buildings that rose like polished monuments to money. It was a weekday morning, the kind where the air was warm but not yet heavy, the breeze off Biscayne Bay threading its way through palm leaves and high-rise shadows. Cars glided past with engines softened by luxury. Valets moved like choreographed pieces, opening doors, waving hands, practiced smiles. Aliyah walked along the sidewalk with her children beside her, each step unhurried. She did not try to match the pace of people in business suits, moving as if schedules were stitched into their skin. She didn't need to. Her pace was her own. Malik held her left hand. Nia held her right. They were close, not out of fear, but out of habit. They had always moved together, a small circle of warmth in a world that liked to pretend warmth was a luxury item. The boutique appeared at the corner where sunlight caught the glass panels and fractured them into soft gold. L'Étoile. Even the sign seemed to whisper its own importance. Inside, the air was cool, not cold, precise. Engineered comfort. The kind that told you someone had planned the temperature the same way someone else planned the price tags. The floor was marble, white with fine grey veins, like something carved from old wealth. Displays of dresses stood under spotlight beams, each piece arranged like art instead of clothing. Everything in the room spoke without speaking. Expensive, exclusive, not for you. At least that's what it told people like Aliyah. But she did not flinch. Her children looked around with wide eyes. They saw beauty, not boundary. Aliyah paused before moving farther in, adjusting the small strap of her bag on her shoulder. It was quiet in the boutique, the kind of quiet where sound carried and silence judged. A woman behind the counter looked up. Her eyes landed on Aliyah, then on Malik, then on Nia. Her smile came slowly, like it had to pass through something first. Aliyah felt it, the shift, the subtle weight in the air. Her children did too, but she did not let the moment settle on them like dust. She leaned down and spoke gently, her voice a soft thread of gold weaving through the stillness. "Remember," she said, "we walk where we choose, not where others tell us to." Nia nodded. Malik did not speak, but his fingers tightened around hers. Then Aliyah took a step forward, and the boutique watched. The sales associate approached with steps that were light but calculated, the kind of walk meant to seem effortless, but trained to signal authority. She was tall, with a sleek ponytail that didn't move when she walked, and a white blouse pressed so sharply it looked like it had never been worn before. Her smile appeared, thin, glossy, polished, the kind of smile that was less welcome and more evaluation. "Hello," she said, voice coated in honey that didn't taste sweet. "Can I help you with something today?" Her gaze slid, softly, to Aliyah's sandals, then her simple bag, then the cotton blouse. Not rushed, but deliberate. A quiet scan. Their wordless judgment. Aliyah returned the smile, genuine, warm, untouched by the chill in the associate's tone. "We're just looking around," she replied. "Thank you." The associate nodded, but her eyes had already begun speaking a different language. People who just look around don't buy. She clasped her hands in front of her, posture still and poised. "Of course," she said, then added lightly, "just please make sure the children don't touch any fabric. Some of these materials are delicate." Malik's head lifted. Nia blinked slowly, her small hand still holding her mother's. Aliyah felt their reactions, small changes in breath, in muscle, in stillness. She had learned to track such things long ago. Children understood tone better than adults did. She crouched softly, bringing herself level with them, not to correct, not to contain, but to remind. "What did I tell you all before we came in?" she asked gently. Malik answered without hesitation, though his voice was quiet, "that we act like we belong anywhere we walk." Aliyah smiled. "And why?" she asked. Nia's voice chimed in, a whisper that still carried, "Because we do." Aliyah kissed her forehead, stood, and continued forward. The associate watched, a flicker of something crossing her face. Not guilt, not reflection, confusion. She was used to her tone-shaping behavior, hushing confidence, shrinking presence, but Aliyah didn't shrink. She moved toward a display in the center of the boutique, a dress draped on a mannequin beneath a single spotlight. The fabric was stunning, flowing, elegant, textured like memory. Aliyah reached out, not to touch, but to see. Designers look with the eyes first. "It's one of our most expensive pieces," the associate said quickly, stepping closer. "Perhaps I can show you something simpler." The words were soft, but the meaning was heavy. Malik's jaw tightened again. Nia's fingers curled into her mother's. Aliyah exhaled and slow, steady, and turned to face the associate fully. No confrontation, just presence. "I'd like to see this one," she said simply. It was not a request, it was a reminder. The room did not shift yet, but the ground beneath it had begun to loosen. The associate hesitated, just for a flicker of a second, but it was enough. Enough to reveal that she believed the request was unreasonable. Enough for Malik to see it. Enough for Nia to feel it. "Of course," the associate said finally, arranging her face back into its polite shape. She reached for the dress with controlled hands, her movements exaggeratedly careful, as though Alia's proximity itself posed a danger to the fabric. The dress was made of sand-colored silk that flowed like wind over water. Alia recognized the stitching style instantly, hand-threaded paneling, the kind that takes patience, not machines. She didn't need to touch the dress to understand its craftsmanship. She had sewn better, but that wasn't the point. The point was what her children were learning in these small, sharp moments. Moments that try to tell them, some doors open for others, not for you. Alia would not let the world teach that lesson. As the associate lifted the dress from the mannequin, a group of women entered the boutique, laughter trailing behind them like perfume. They were dressed in neutral tones that signaled wealth not by color, but by confidence. They moved like the room belonged to them. They saw Alia. They saw her children. They saw the dress being presented to her, and the laughter softened, not stopped, just thinned, the way laughter does when amusement shifts into superiority. One of the women leaned toward her friend and whispered, the kind of whisper designed to be heard. "She's just going to check the price tag and pretend she'll come back later," she murmured. Alia didn't turn. She didn't tense. She didn't flinch. Malik did. His chin lifted, his eyes sharpened. The quiet kind of anger children feel before they learn how to swallow it. Nia moved closer to her mother, her fingers tracing the inside of Alia's wrist, grounding, like she needed reassurance that her mother was still unshaken. Alia looked at the associate's hands, still holding the dress. "Thank you," she said softly. "May I see it near the window? Silk shows its true texture in natural light." The associate blinked. Not many customers knew that. "Of course," she said again, but this time the tone was different. Less sweet, more watchful. They walked toward the window display, the dress trailing like a breeze behind them. Sunlight filtered through the glass, illuminating the fabric, and Alia with it. For a moment, the boutique was quiet. The customers, the associates, the children, all looking at the woman who stood there calmly, like she belonged in that golden light. Because she did. No name tag, no title, no announcement, just presence. The associate's voice came again. "Careful now. Are you a designer?" Alia didn't look at her. She looked at her children and smiled, but she didn't answer. Not yet, because the room wasn't ready for the truth. The sunlight softened the silk, revealing its movement, a fabric that breathed. Alia lifted just the edge of the hem between two fingers, barely touching it, the way someone who respects art handles it. The associate watched her, really watched her, and something shifted in her eyes. Not warmth, not respect, recognition, not of who Alia was, but of someone who knew what she was looking at. Before the moment could settle, the boutique manager appeared. Her presence arrived before her voice. Clipped heels, perfume that cost more than some people made in a week, hair pulled back too tight, smile too bright, the kind worn like armor or like a crown. She looked at Alia for exactly 1 second, then she smiled, but it was the wrong smile. "Oh, sweetheart," she said in a tone dripping with practiced charm. "Let me show you some items from our accessible line. They're more realistic." Her eyes flicked to Malik and Nia, especially considering your situation. The room didn't gasp. Nobody needed to. The cruelty was quiet, which made it sharper. Malik's shoulders stiffened. Nia stepped even closer to her mother, so close her cheek touched her hip. Alia didn't move, not forward, not away, not up, not down. She simply remained. Stillness is a kind of power people forget. "What situation is that?" Alia asked gently. No challenge, no raised voice, just a question. The manager's smile tightened, just a hair. "Well," she said, lowering her tone as though offering kindness, "boutiques like ours tend to work with clientele who are accustomed to our pricing. We wouldn't want to make your children uncomfortable with items they can't try on." There it was, the lesson, not spoken to Alia, spoken through her, spoken at her children. "You do not belong where beauty is." Alia breathed in, slow, deep. She didn't look at the manager. She looked at Nia, whose lower lip trembled just slightly. She looked at Malik, whose jaw was clenched so tight it looked painful. Alia crouched beside them, bringing herself eye-level with her children, and speaking not loudly, not pointedly, but with quiet certainty, meant only for them. "We go where we choose," she whispered, "not where we're permitted." Malik swallowed hard. Nia blinked up at her with the beginnings of belief returning to her eyes. Alia stood. The manager's smile was still there, but now it was too bright. The kind of smile that starts to crack. "We'll take a look around," Aaliyah said. Not asking, saying. The manager stepped back. Just one small step. But Malik saw it. Nia saw it. The boutique didn't realize it yet, but something had shifted. Not in the fabric, not in the air, in power, and the room could feel it. The boutique didn't grow louder. It grew still, not silence. Attention. The kind people pretend they're not giving, but everyone feels. Aaliyah walked toward a rack of dresses near the back wall, Malik and Nia staying close, their hands brushing hers in quiet intervals. Their footsteps softened against the marble, and the air conditioning hummed gently above them, and yet every movement felt observed. The manager followed at a distance, her heels clicking just slow enough to feel deliberate. The first associate pretended to adjust handbags on a shelf, but kept glancing over. The group of women whispered again, but now their whispers were shaped by curiosity, not dismissal. Something about the way Aaliyah carried herself didn't match the story they had already written about her. Malik was the first to notice the woman near the shoe display, her gaze lingering too long, her posture hesitant, almost uncertain. "Mom," Malik whispered, tugging gently on her arm. "They keep looking at us." Aaliyah didn't look up from the fabric she was examining. "I know," she said softly. "Why?" he asked. Aaliyah looked at him, not at the room, and when she spoke, her voice was warm, grounded. "People look when they think they already know who you are," she said, "and they look again when they start to realize they might be wrong." Malik held onto the words, the weight of them settling into him like a stone that felt heavy and steady at once. Nia wasn't watching the adults. She was watching her mother's hands, the way they moved over fabric gently like she understood it, like she spoke its language. "Mommy," she whispered, "you look like the dresses are talking to you." Aaliyah smiled, not outward, inward, where truth lives. "They are," she said softly. A silence hung in the air, not awkward, not tense, anticipatory. That's when the manager stepped closer again. Her smile now stretched just a bit too wide, like she was trying to gain back something she didn't realize she had lost. "So," she said lightly, "do you sew? Or are you just interested in fashion?" Just. That word. Small, sharp, designed to shrink. Aaliyah didn't look at her. She continued running her fingers lightly down a seam, recognizing the machine tension stitch pattern instantly. She spoke without hurry, without performance. "I design," she said simply. The manager blinked, something flickering behind her eyes. One of the women across the room murmured to her friend, probably Etsy. It was meant to be quiet. Malik heard it. His shoulders tensed. But Aaliyah remained centered, stillness steady as breath, not because she didn't notice, but because she chose not to give the room the reaction it was fishing for. She did not need to prove herself. Not here, not to them, not yet, because the truth was coming. And when it arrived, it would not knock. It would open the door. Nia had always been gentle with beautiful things. She didn't grab, she didn't tug. She observed, with hands tucked close to her chest, like she was protecting the world from her own curiosity. She stood now before a necklace displayed on a velvet stand near the register, a delicate chain with small gold stars that shimmered like they were lit from within. It reminded her of bedtime stories Aaliyah used to tell, of skies so full of stars they felt like they were singing. She didn't touch it. She only leaned closer. The manager saw movement, not intention. "Sweetheart," she said sharply, louder than she needed to, "please don't handle the merchandise. It's very expensive." The room turned. Not dramatically, just enough. Nia froze. Her hand hadn't moved, not even a finger. Aaliyah saw her daughter's breath catch, small, soft, silent, but heavy enough to crush. Malik stepped forward instinctively, protective, jaw set. "She wasn't touching it," he said. Not loud, not rude, just true. The manager smiled, but not the kind that apologizes. "Oh, I'm sure," she said lightly, dripping dismissal, "but accidents happen, and we wouldn't want any misunderstandings." There it was, a warning, wrapped in sugar, delivered like kindness. Aaliyah walked to her daughter and crouched again. Same level, same steady heart. "What did we say about who we are?" she asked gently, brushing a stray curl from Nia's forehead. Nia swallowed. "We belong wherever we are." Her voice was small, but not broken. Aaliyah smiled, warm and certain. "That's right." She stood slowly. But when she rose, the energy in the room rose with her. Not anger, presence. Then she looked at the manager, not confrontational, not defensive, just seeing her. "My daughter didn't touch anything," she said softly, "and I don't appreciate assumptions." The boutique fell into stillness, not the calm kind, the kind right before something shifts. The manager's smile tightened, like fabric pulled too thin. "Well," she said, "this is a luxury boutique. We simply try to avoid incidents. I'm sure you understand." Aaliyah's head tilted slightly, not in confusion, in recognition. Yes, she understood perfectly. She had lived her life inside moments just like this, but her children would not grow up learning to bow to them. She rested one hand lightly on Malik's shoulder. His breathing slowed. Nia slipped her fingers into her mother's again. The manager couldn't see it. The other customers couldn't see it. The associate couldn't see it. But something fundamental had just rearranged itself. Aaliyah was no longer the one being evaluated. The room was, and the room was failing. The manager didn't step back. People rarely do when they think they're right. She angled her body slightly, enough to stand between Aaliyah and the dress rack, not blocking, just positioning, subtle, claiming authority. Aaliyah noticed. Of course she noticed. Most people think disrespect happens in words. It happens in placement, in who assumes they stand in the center, and who they try to move to the edges. "Perhaps," the manager said, her tone now coated with something softer but sharper, "this isn't really the environment for children. We usually find they get restless. There's a lovely cafe nearby with coloring books. Maybe they'd be more comfortable there while you look." Translated, "Take your children away. They don't belong in beautiful places. And neither do you." Malik's breath hitched, not loud, but deep. He understood that one. Nia didn't speak. Her hand tightened around her mother's. Aaliyah didn't respond right away. She looked at her children first, not to reassure them, but to remember. She was not raising them to shrink. She was raising them to stand. Only then did she look at the manager. Her expression was still calm, still composed, still soft, but the warmth had changed. "This is my environment," Aaliyah said quietly. No emphasis, no edge, just truth. The manager's smile flickered. The first crack. "I'm sure it feels that way," she said, "but unfortunately policy—" Aaliyah cut her off, not with volume, with tone. "Your policy does not decide where my children are allowed to stand." The boutique air changed. Small shift, sharp shift. Even the lighting seemed to hold still, refracted in glass, waiting. The group of women near the handbags stopped pretending not to watch. The first associate looked between Aaliyah and the manager, her expression tightening into something uncertain. The manager took a slow breath, composing herself. "I'm simply trying to maintain the atmosphere of our store," she said. "Our clientele expect a certain level of—" She didn't finish, because Malik spoke. His voice didn't shake. "Are we making the place look bad to you?" The room froze. Children aren't supposed to say things like that. They're supposed to swallow them. Aaliyah didn't tell him to apologize. She just rested her hand on his shoulder, grounding him, not silencing him. The manager blinked, thrown off balance for the first time. "Well," she said, "I'm just saying that some people prefer people who look like them," Malik said. No one moved. Nia looked up at her brother, like she was seeing him new, stronger, older, rooted. The truth had been spoken out loud now. No sugar, no veil. The manager's voice thinned. "This conversation is becoming uncomfortable," she said. Aaliyah's answer was nearly a whisper. "It's uncomfortable because it's honest." The boutique didn't know it yet, but this was the moment everything started to unravel. The humiliation had been delivered, but so had the lesson. And now the truth was coming, not slowly, but all at once. The manager's smile returned, but it was different now. Not polished, not composed, defensive. The kind of smile someone wears when they feel control slipping through their fingers. She straightened slightly, shoulders pulling back as if reclaiming height. "Well," she said, her tone tightening into practiced professionalism, "if you'd still like to see the dress, I suppose we can arrange a fitting room." The word still cut sharper than anything else she'd said. It meant, even after being told you don't belong here. Aaliyah didn't react. She didn't give the room what it wanted. A flinch, an apology, a shrinking. She simply nodded. "Yes," she said, "we'd like that." Malik and Nia stood close to her side as the associate led them toward the back of the boutique. The fitting rooms were arranged like private galleries, velvet curtains, gold hooks, mirrors framed in brushed brass. Aaliyah stepped into one, and the associate hung the dress carefully on the wall hook. "If you need any gas assistance," the associate said, "just let me know." She walked away, but the pause on the word assistance lingered, as if she assumed Aliyah didn't know how to handle the garment. Aliyah let the curtain fall closed. The silence inside the fitting room felt different, warmer, protected. Malik sat on the small bench beside the mirror, arms crossed tight, holding more than anger, holding disappointment. Nia stood near the curtain, fingers lightly touching the edge of the velvet, as if making sure the world outside didn't push through. Aliyah's back remained straight. "Mum," Malik said, voice low, "why didn't you tell them who you are?" Aliyah paused, not because she didn't have an answer, because the answer mattered. She kneeled beside him, placing her hand on his shoulder. "If I tell someone who I am to make them treat me better," she said softly, "then they were never respecting me. They were respecting the title." Malik's breath shuddered, slow, controlled. Nia looked up at her mother with wide, searching eyes. "So, we wait?" Aliyah smiled. Small, sure. "No," she said. "We simply stand. The truth always arrives on time." She rose, unhurried, and lifted the dress from the hook. The fabric draped gracefully, reacting to her touch, not like she was foreign to it, but like she understood it, because she did. She had sewn this fabric before, chosen this exact thread count, redesigned this neckline, not this dress, but one of hers. And that was the quiet poetry of the moment. The boutique believed it was the guardian of beauty, but Aliyah was the creator of it. Outside the fitting room, another customer whispered, "Why is she trying that on?" Another answered, "They'll tell her the price and she'll leave." But inside, where truth lived, Aliyah breathed freely. The room outside was tightening. The center of this story was in here, calm, rooted, unmoving. The storm was coming, not from Aliyah, from the truth. And the boutique was not prepared. Outside the fitting room, the boutique had shifted into a quiet stage. Not loud, not dramatic, just watching. The group of women who had whispered earlier now stood near the jewelry case, pretending to browse. But their eyes flicked toward the fitting rooms like they were waiting to see someone fail. The associate who had brought the dress leaned against the counter, arms crossed, posture stiff, trying to look relaxed while her pulse betrayed her. And the manager? She stood near the register, tapping her manicured nails softly against the counter, the rhythm steady, controlled. But control is a fragile thing, especially when it's built on assumptions. She took out her phone and dialed, low voice, privacy posture, but in a boutique as quiet as this, everyone heard the first sentence. "Yes, I need to speak to the district coordinator, immediately." There it was, fear of inconvenience becoming consequence, not because Aliyah had done anything wrong, but because the manager felt something she couldn't name. The situation wasn't going the way it usually did. The call connected, and her tone switched into professional sweetness. "Hello. Yes, I just wanted to verify the scheduled walkthrough for today. I heard a rumor that the company might be sending someone to evaluate staff performance before the merger." Merger. The word slipped. She hadn't meant to say it loud enough for others to hear. But Malik heard it. Nia heard it. The boutique heard it. One of the women near the handbag wall whispered, "Merger? With who?" The manager continued, lower now, but still audible. "Yes, I just want to confirm we'll be given advance notice if the new ownership or brand representatives are coming in. We prefer to prepare the environment accordingly. Prepare the environment. Meaning, we want time to hide how we treat people we think don't matter." The associate's eyes widened. She suddenly understood. Someone important was coming today. Someone from the brand buying the boutique. Someone who would change everything. She looked toward the fitting room, and for the first time she wondered, did we just make a mistake? Meanwhile, inside the fitting room, Nia watched her mother step into the dress, the silk cascading over her shoulders like it had been waiting for her. "Mommy," she whispered, breath caught in wonder. "You look like the sun." Aliyah didn't smile out of vanity. She smiled because her daughter had seen her, not the dress. Malik stood slowly, his anger softening into awe. "Mom," he said, voice steady, "this looks like something you designed." Aliyah paused, just a heartbeat, just enough. Then, "It is." Outside the curtain, footsteps stopped. Silence thickened, because someone had heard her. Not her children, not the boutique staff, not the manager. The district representative had just walked in. The boutique inhaled and held its breath. The freeze was beginning. The storm had just walked through the door, and the room knew it. The boutique door chimed again, but this time, No one pretended not to hear it. The air changed, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. A man entered, dressed in tailored charcoal slacks and a linen blazer the color of warm sand. Understated, expensive in the way that doesn't need logos. He carried a leather portfolio tucked under one arm and wore a simple lapel pin that most people would overlook. Most people. But the manager noticed. Her posture straightened so fast the movement was almost a flinch. "Oh, Mr. Carver," she exclaimed, her voice suddenly bright, polished. "We weren't expecting you today." He smiled politely, but it wasn't really a smile. It was the kind of expression people wear when they're already observing. "I was in the area," he said. His tone was calm, almost gentle. "Thought I'd walk the floor before the transition begins." Transition. He said it so casually. The women near the handbags stiffened, not because they understood business language, but because instinct tells you when power has entered a room. The manager's eyes flicked subtly toward the fitting rooms. She didn't need to explain. She didn't need to point. Mr. Carver saw the look, and that was enough. He walked the boutique slowly, like a man who already knows what he came to find. His gaze passed over displays, shelves, lighting, presentation. Then he paused. At the children's bench outside the fitting room, 2 sets of small shoes, one boy's backpack, worn at the corners but clean, cared for, a hair clip shaped like a sunflower. He smiled, this time a real one. The curtain rustled slightly. Aaliyah stepped out. The dress flowed around her like it had been born for her body. Not fitted, not forced, just right. Malik stood beside her, shoulders squared. Nia held her mother's hand, chin lifted just enough to say she was trying to be brave. The boutique didn't breathe. Even the light seemed to hold still. Mr. Carver looked at Aaliyah the way a person looks at something familiar, not in recognition of her face, but recognition of truth. "Aaliyah," he said warmly, "I'm glad you came in person." The room stopped. The manager's painted smile froze at the edges. The associate's hands tightened around a folded stack of scarves. The group of women fell into a silence that was not polite, but stunned. Aaliyah didn't rush. She didn't perform. She simply nodded. "Good morning," she said softly. Nia looked up at her mother. Malik exhaled, a slow, steady breath he'd been holding for blocks. The manager blinked rapidly, her voice struggling to find shape. You two know each other?" Mr. Carver looked at her, calm and steady. "Yes," he said. "Aaliyah is the owner of Amara." The boutique manager swallowed. A breath, a realization, a collapse hidden behind her eyes. Mr. Carver continued, with no need to raise his voice. "And as of next week, she will be your employer." The room didn't gasp. The room went silent in the way rooms go silent when truth walks in wearing silk. No one spoke. Not the customers, not the associates, not the manager, though her lips were parted, as if a sentence had started forming and then died mid-breath. It wasn't the kind of silence that comes from surprise. It was the kind that comes from truth, the kind that makes the room suddenly feel too small. Aaliyah didn't move to fill the silence. She didn't need to. Truth needs space. Mr. Carver turned to the children, not with pity, not with apology, but with respect. "And these must be Malik and Nia," he said, kneeling just slightly so he was speaking to them, not over them. "Your mother talks about you both, a lot." Malik blinked, not expecting to be acknowledged. Nia's hand tightened around her mother's, but this time it wasn't fear. It was pride. The group of women near the handbags shifted uncomfortably. Their confidence had leaked out of them, replaced with a sharp, brittle awareness of themselves. They weren't used to seeing dignity. Not quiet dignity. Dignity that didn't need to prove anything. The manager finally inhaled, a breath that trembled at the edges. "Well," she said, trying to recover her practiced smile, this is certainly an unexpected visit." The sentence fell flat, because everyone heard what wasn't said. "This is not the outcome we planned." Mr. Carver's voice remained calm, steady, grounded. "No," he said. It was necessary. His words didn't hit hard. They hit true. Aaliyah still hadn't spoken. She stood there in the dress, sunlight catching where the silk draped over her shoulder, and she looked neither triumphant nor angry, just present, which was more powerful than either. The manager swallowed again, her mask cracking now. "I didn't realize—" She stopped, because finishing the sentence would mean admitting the judgment. "I didn't realize you were important." Aaliyah finally spoke, softly, but clearly enough for every person in the boutique to hear. "You didn't need to know who I am to treat me with respect." The words didn't echo, they didn't need to. They landed. The associate's face fell, not into guilt, but into understanding. Slow, heavy, real. One of the women near the handbags lowered her gaze, not because she was ashamed of Aliyah, but because she was ashamed of herself. Malik looked up at his mother, and the look in his eyes changed. It wasn't the look of a child seeing a parent. It was the look of a child learning how to become one day. Nia stepped forward, still holding Aliyah's hand, and whispered, not quietly enough for the room to miss, "Mommy, we do belong here." Aliyah looked at her, eyes gentle, deep. "Yes," she said, "we always did." No one argued. No one could. The boutique wasn't frozen anymore. It was awake, and awakening is much scarier than silence. The manager's hands trembled, not enough to be dramatic, but enough for anyone watching closely to see. She smoothed her blouse twice, a gesture of someone trying to reassemble themselves before speaking. "Aliyah," she began, voice softer now, stripped of its earlier sweetness. I want to apologize. I didn't mean to—" Aliyah raised a hand, not sharply, not dismissively, simply to pause the moment. "Please," she said gently, "don't apologize because you found out who I am." The room absorbed the words, slowly, deeply. The manager's throat tightened. She tried again. "I understand that it may have come across as—" "No," Aliyah said, still calm. "There was no misunderstanding. You chose how to see me. The honesty did not wound. It clarified. The customers watched, uncomfortable now, not because of Aliyah's presence, but because they saw their own reflections in the moment. Malik stood a little taller. Nia leaned into her mother's side, steady, quiet, listening. Mr. Carver did not interrupt. This was not a business conversation anymore. This was something older, something deeper. The manager swallowed, eyes lowering, defenses folding in on themselves. She was not used to being seen. "I made assumptions," she said, the words thick, almost clumsy. Aliyah nodded slowly. "Yes," she replied, "and my children saw them." That was the wound, not to Aliyah, to Malik and Nia. That was what had mattered all along. The manager's eyes flicked toward the children, really seeing them for the first time, not as shadows, not as background, as people. "I'm sorry," she whispered, this time real, small, human. Nia's little hand squeezed her mother's. Malik exhaled, not forgiveness, not softness, just release. Aliyah didn't offer comfort. She didn't fill the silence. She didn't smooth the moment so others could escape discomfort. She let the truth stay, because discomfort is where growth happens. Mr. Carver finally stepped forward, his tone quiet, steady. "There will be retraining," he said to the manager, "and restructuring of hiring and staff culture, effective immediately." The manager nodded, not resisting. The associate nodded too, eyes glossy with understanding. The women near the handbags instinctively stepped back, as if making room for something larger than themselves. And then Aliyah rested her hand gently on Malik's shoulder, the other on Nia's. She didn't have to say a word. The room already felt the lesson. Respect is not earned by status. It is given because humanity exists. The boutique didn't just look different now, it felt different. The shift was not loud, it was rooted, and the roots were deep. Perfeito. Agora entramos no bloco 13, onde a história muda de correção para reconhecimento. Aqui, o ambiente precisa aceitar que a Aliyah não é exceção. Ela é a standard que deveria ter existido desde o começo. The boutique was quiet again, but not the same quiet as before. Earlier, the silence had been made of judgment. Now, it was made of awareness. The women near the handbag display slowly pretended to return to browsing, but their movements were stiff. Every motion weighted with something unspoken. They weren't looking at the merchandise anymore. They were replaying their own behavior. The associate who had warned Aliyah about delicate items stepped forward, her hands clasped in front of her, the gesture of someone who suddenly remembers how to be humble. "I didn't realize," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Aliyah looked at her, and the associate flinched, not because Aliyah was harsh, but because Aliyah saw her honestly. "You don't need to realize who someone is," Aliyah said gently. "Just meet them with respect to begin with." The associate nodded, a small, quiet nod, the kind people make when they're learning something that will stay. Malik watched all of this silently. For the first time in his young life, he understood something that had been shaping the world around him, long before he had words for it. People treat you differently when they think you don't matter, and they treat you differently again when they think you do. He looked up at his mother, not confused, not sad, thoughtful. "Mom," he said, "if they had known you owned the brand first, would they have treated us different?" Aaliyah turned toward him fully. Her hand rested over his heart. Steady, firm, warm. "Yes," she said. "But that's why it mattered that they didn't know." Malik nodded slowly, not because he agreed instantly, but because he was becoming someone who thought deeply. Nia tugged gently on her mother's dress. "Mommy," she whispered, "why did they act like we didn't belong when we walked in?" Aaliyah knelt again to match her daughter's height, the silk dress flowing around her like quiet armor. "Some people think belonging comes from money," she said, tucking a curl behind Nia's ear. "But belonging comes from being human." Nia blinked, absorbing it the way children absorb important things, slowly, completely, into the bone. Mr. Carver watched this, and something in his expression softened. Respect, not for Aaliyah's title, not for her position, for her character. This was the moment where the boutique, the room itself, learned something. Power is not volume. Power is presence. And Aaliyah's presence was unmistakable now. She didn't have to demand space. She was the space. The boutique didn't just see a customer anymore, it saw a foundation, and the foundation was unshakable. The fitting room area had emptied, but the boutique still felt full, not of noise but of everything unspoken. Aaliyah stepped closer to the mirror, Malik and Nia at her sides, and for the first time since they entered the store, she allowed herself to look. The dress didn't just fit. It belonged to her, not because of what it cost, but because of what it represented. Her work, her craft, her endurance, her story stitched into fabric, not loud, not flashy, but undeniable. Nia looked at her reflection, then at her mother's, then back again, her small brow furrowing in concentration. "Mommy," she said softly, "you look like you're supposed to be wearing it." Aaliyah smiled, slow and warm. "Thank you, baby." Malik didn't speak right away. He stood with his hands in his pockets, a little older than he had been just an hour ago. His eyes were steady. "It's not the dress that changed, right?" he said quietly. "It's the way they see it now, the way they see you." Aaliyah turned to him, her expression gentle. "Yes," she said, "and the way you saw yourself stayed the same. That's what matters." He swallowed, a small, grounding breath. "I want to remember this," he said. Nia wrapped her arms around Aaliyah's waist, hugging her carefully like she was protecting the dress. Aaliyah pulled both children close, the three of them standing in front of the mirror together. And for a moment, just a small one, the boutique, the customers, the tension, the humiliation, the judgment, all fell away. It was just a mother and her children, together, unbroken, seen. Aaliyah smoothed Nia's hair, then Malik's collar, her touch gentle, deliberate, the way someone touches something precious. "People will try to tell you who you are," she murmured, not for the boutique to hear, but for them, sometimes with words, sometimes with silence, sometimes with the way they look at you. Nia's eyes lifted to hers. "But we don't listen to them." Aaliyah bent her forehead to Nia's, her voice like a steady drum in the storm. "No, we never forget who we are." Malik nodded, strong now. The curtain rustled slightly in the quiet, not from someone pushing it, but from the boutique's air shifting around them, like the room itself had finally exhaled. In that moment, the mirror didn't just show their reflections. It showed who they were becoming, a family that could walk into any room, any space, any world and belong, not because the world welcomed them, but because they arrived with themselves. Outside the fitting room, the boutique's rhythm had changed. People moved more carefully now, not because they feared punishment, but because they understood something had shifted. The manager approached slowly, hands clasped, voice softened and controlled. "We have private fitting suites upstairs," she said, her tone almost gentle. "If you'd prefer a more comfortable space for you and your children, we can prepare one immediately." Translated, "Now that we know who you are, we will treat you better." Aaliyah looked at her for a long moment, not cruel, not cold, simply present. "Thank you," she replied evenly, "but we're comfortable here." The manager blinked, because she didn't understand. She had expected relief, gratitude, a chance to erase the moment that had just happened. People like her always expected the story to reset once the truth was revealed. But Aaliyah wasn't interested in undoing the discomfort. She was interested in changing what caused it. Mr. Carver stepped beside her, his presence quiet but firm. "The new ownership has very clear expectations," he said, his voice steady. Respect and equity are not optional, they're foundational. The manager nodded, not defensively now, but with a weight that suggested the lesson had rooted somewhere deeper. One of the women from the handbag area stepped closer, her cheeks flushed with something between shame and awakening. "I didn't speak up," she murmured. "I didn't say anything. I just watched it happen." Aliyah looked at her, and the woman held the gaze even though it was hard. "It matters that you see it now," Aliyah said. "Not forgiveness, recognition, because accountability is not humiliation, it's awareness." Malik watched the exchange and saw something he'd never seen before. Strength didn't always look like standing tall. Sometimes strength looked like someone learning out loud. Nia, small fingers curled around her mother's hand, whispered, "Not afraid now, just curious. Are we going to stay, Mummy?" Aliyah bent slightly, just enough to meet her daughter's eyes. "Yes," she said, "because we walk away when we decide to, not when someone tries to make us feel small." Nia nodded, understanding not every word, but all of the meaning. The associate stepped forward next, solemn. "If you'd like help adjusting the dress, I can assist," she said, and this time her voice was steady. Not performing, not pretending, learning. Aliyah nodded once. "Yes," she said, "thank you," and the room understood. This was not grace for the boutique. This was grace for the future. A seed, a beginning, a new standard, not earned through apology, but through truth recognized. And as the associate entered the fitting space to help, the boutique no longer looked like a place that didn't want them. It looked like a place learning how to hold them. The associate stepped into the fitting room, holding a tin of silver pins and a soft measuring tape. Her movements were careful now, not nervous but respectful. She watched how Aliyah held the dress, not tugging, not adjusting, just allowing the fabric to fall exactly where it wanted to. "May I?" the associate asked gently. Aliyah nodded. The associate reached for the shoulder seam, but paused when she noticed something subtle. Aliyah had already moved it into the correct position, the natural one, the one that allowed the dress to drape the way the designer intended. The designer who, unbeknownst to the associate, was standing right there wearing it. "You know how to fit garments," the associate said softly. Aliyah smiled, small, warm, unassuming. "I've spent some time around fabric," she replied. But Malik and Nia exchanged a look. They knew how much time. Years, decades, study, skill, precision earned from hands, heart, and hunger. The associate pinned the waistline, slow and careful, letting the silk fall naturally. Aliyah lifted her arm, elegant, instinctive. "You know," Aliyah said thoughtfully, "the bust dart sits better if the angle follows the rib line instead of the armhole. It allows the silhouette to breathe instead of pull." The associate froze, only for a second, because she recognized that language. Exact, technical, lived. She adjusted the fabric exactly as Aliyah suggested, and watched the dress transform instantly. "Oh," she breathed. "Yes, that's beautiful." Aliyah nodded once, as if confirming something she already knew. Malik smiled, pride blooming quietly behind his eyes. Nia watched the scene with hands clasped beneath her chin, the way children watch magic. The associate stepped back. "Do you work in fashion?" she asked, not because she was fishing, but because she was finally curious in the right way. Aliyah didn't answer quickly. She looked into the mirror, the children standing with her, the boutique behind her, the manager watching from a distance, learning, the customers pretending to browse, but listening. Mr. Carver observing everything with calm recognition. Then, "Yes," Aliyah said softly, "I design, and I build teams who help bring the designs to life." The associate nodded slowly, not shocked, not overwhelmed, understanding. The mirror reflected the truth now. Not a woman trying on a dress, a woman in her element, surrounded by people who were finally beginning to see. The associate swallowed, then asked something no one in the boutique had asked yet. "What is the name of your label?" Aliyah's answer was quiet, not prideful, not loud, just true. "Amara." The associate inhaled softly, the recognition blooming slowly behind her eyes. Not because she had known the name, but because now she would never forget it. This was how inheritance began. Not with money, not with ownership, with truth spoken in a quiet room. The boutique had returned to motion, but not the same motion as before. People didn't move around Aliyah anymore. They moved with awareness of her. The associate stepped away from the fitting area, carrying the fabric pins with a reverence that hadn't been there an hour ago. She returned to the front of the boutique, where the group of women still lingered, and whispered something. Not gossip, recognition. "Amara," she said quietly. "That's her brand. I think she's the founder." It was barely a sentence, barely a voice, but whispers are not measured by volume. They are measured by effect. The women didn't react dramatically. They didn't gasp or step back. Their posture simply changed. Spines straightened, bravado softened, judgment dissolved. Because suddenly, this was not a narrative about a woman who didn't belong. This was a narrative about a woman who had arrived before the world knew to expect her. One of the women, the one with the diamond bracelet and a confidence that had always leaned toward superiority, stepped a little closer to the fitting room. "Is that really her?" she murmured. The associate nodded. The woman's face shifted, not into embarrassment but into self-reflection. Because once truth is visible, pretense becomes impossible. Meanwhile, Aliyah was fastening one of Nia's hair clips, the small sunflower-shaped one, because her daughter's curls had fallen loose during all the movement. "Hold still for me," Aliyah murmured. Nia smiled, bright but calm, because she knew she was safe. Malik stood near the mirror, studying his mother the way children watch legends form. He didn't need applause. He didn't need validation. He just needed to remember this. This is who she is, he thought. Always was. The curtain shifted, not dramatically, just a soft sound that signaled movement. The manager stepped forward, not rushing, not frightened, but changed. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, careful, human. "Aliyah," she said, "would you allow me the opportunity to restart, to meet you properly?" Aliyah turned, the dress shimmering like it had been waiting for light. She didn't smile, but she wasn't cold. Her expression was something much more powerful, measured grace. "You may greet my children properly first," Aliyah said. Not an instruction, a reorientation. The manager inhaled, a realization settling into her bones. She kneeled, not to beg, to level. "Hello, Malik. Hello, Nia," she said softly. "You are welcome here." Malik didn't gloat. Nia didn't hide. They simply nodded, acknowledging what had been absent, now present. Aliyah's eyes softened, just slightly. Not forgiveness. Alignment. Across the store, Mr. Carver watched, and the smallest smile touched the corner of his mouth, not because he was pleased, but because he had just witnessed something extremely rare, a room that learned. And the learning was not the end, it was the turn. Aliyah adjusted the dress one final time, calm, centered, unmoved. The boutique belonged to her now, not because she owned it, but because she took her place in it. The boutique was still, not frozen, recalibrating. There was a difference. People were no longer watching Aliyah out of curiosity, suspicion, or silent judgment. They were watching her the way people watch something important happen, quietly, carefully, afraid to break the moment. Aliyah stepped from the fitting room with Malik and Nia beside her, not positioned behind her like accessories to her presence, but walking beside her as equals in experience. The silk of the dress flowed as she moved, not dramatic, but assured, like water moving around stone. Mr. Carver stood nearby, hands folded behind his back, the posture of a man witnessing something profoundly correct. But Aliyah didn't turn to him. She walked toward the front of the boutique, where a display mannequin stood near the window, wearing the dress in another color, a version designed to sell, not to speak. She stopped in front of it, ran 2 fingers down the seam. "May I?" she asked the associate. The associate nodded quickly, not fearing reprimand this time, but respecting process. Aliyah adjusted the drape of the bodice by exactly 2 inches. The effect was instant. The mannequin looked alive now, elegant, capable, intended. Whispers again, but different whispers. "That looks better." She fixed it so easily. "Wait, is that how it was supposed to be?" The manager watched, learning silently, intensely. Not defensive now, absorbing. Mr. Carver stepped forward, quiet as always. "She has always worked directly with artisans," he explained to the room. Not formally, not loudly, simply clarifying reality. "She doesn't just design, she understands construction." The boutique hadn't understood that before. Now it did. Aliyah didn't turn, didn't claim the compliment, didn't explain herself. She didn't have to. The work spoke. Malik leaned closer to Nia, whispering, not with excitement, but with reverence. "She made the dress better." Nia nodded, her eyes wide, glowing with pride. "Because she knows how it wants to be," she whispered back. Children often understand truth faster than adults. A woman near the jewelry case, the one who had watched everything unfold, stepped forward hesitantly, something humbled in her expression. "Aaliyah," she said softly, "I never realized someone made these pieces. I always just saw them as something to buy, not something someone crafted." Aaliyah looked at her, not to comfort, not to dismiss, but to connect. "That's all right," she said. "We learn to see things differently when we slow down enough to really look." The woman inhaled, the kind of breath people take when something lands in them. Aaliyah didn't raise her voice. She didn't command attention. She didn't demand recognition. And yet, the boutique was now oriented around her, not because of her title, but because of her presence. Aaliyah did not need the room to know her role. The room simply adjusted to the truth of her place in it, and quietly, softly, power shifted, not announced, not forced, simply claimed. The boutique door chimed again. This time, no one tried to pretend they weren't paying attention. A young woman stepped inside, mid-20s, carefully dressed in a sleek blazer and soft leather flats, a messenger bag slung across her chest. Her posture was quick, efficient, powered by purpose. She scanned the store once, then spotted Mr. Carver. "There you are," she said, slightly out of breath. "Head office just sent the final approval packet for the transition. They want signatures today." She opened her bag to pull out the documents, but then she stopped, because she saw Aaliyah. Her eyes widened, not with surprise, but with recognition. The kind of recognition that comes from posters in corporate hallways, brand history briefings, internal newsletters titled "Words from the Founder." She straightened, instantly. "Aaliyah," she said, voice steady, respectful, real. "It's an honor to meet you in person." The room stilled, not stiff, aware. The women who had whispered before did not whisper now. The associate's hands gently lowered the stack of scarves she had been folding. The manager's breath halted mid-chest, because this was not rumor, this was confirmation. A descendant of the company culture itself had just entered the scene. Aaliyah nodded, returning the greeting simply. "Good morning." The young woman smiled, genuine, not performative. "I'll prepare the documents whenever you're ready. We can complete everything here, or I can schedule a private conference room." "We'll do it here," Aaliyah said softly, not to prove anything, not to make a point, because this space needed to witness it. The young woman nodded, immediately aligned. "Yes, here is good." Mr. Carver watched Aaliyah, but not as though he were managing her, as though he were supporting her presence. The manager finally found her voice, small and fragile but present. "I didn't realize the transition was happening so soon." The young woman turned to her, professional but clear. "It was scheduled to finalize this week," she said. "Amara will be absorbing this boutique into its house brand portfolio. All staff positions will be reviewed and renewed under the new standard of culture." The word hung in the air. Culture, not procedure, not training, not policy. Culture. Aaliyah looked at her children, gently grounding the moment into meaning. "Do you both see?" she asked softly. "No room determines your worth. You determine the worth of the room." Malik nodded, slow, thoughtful. Nia straightened her little shoulders, mirroring her mother without even realizing. The customers didn't look at Aaliyah with awe. They looked at her with understanding, because now they saw not someone who arrived here, but someone who built the road to here. The boutique was quiet, not ashamed, changed. The young corporate liaison set the documents neatly on a glass display table. Mr. Carver stood beside her, his posture calm, hands folded behind his back. Everything was ready. All eyes were on Aaliyah, but Aaliyah wasn't looking at the table, or the papers, or even the people watching. She was looking at her children. Malik stood beside her, shoulders squared, breathing slow. He wasn't a boy right now. He was becoming. Nia held her mother's fingers like they were a lifeline, not to keep from falling, but to stay near what was steady. Aaliyah bent down so the three of them formed a small circle, a quiet world inside the larger one. "Listen to me," she said, her voice warm and low like sunlight through curtains. "This moment isn't about proving who we are to them." Malik swallowed. He understood that line cut deeper than anything today. "It looked like it was," he said softly. "Yes," Aaliyah replied. "But real power doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need to argue. It doesn't need to demand recognition." Her hand gently cupped the side of his face. Real power stands. Nia blinked, her small brow tightening with concentration. And we stood, she whispered. Aaliyah smiled, proud, not triumphant. Yes, my love, you stood. Outside the circle, the boutique waited, patient, silent, like it understood this part was not for them. Aaliyah straightened slowly and finally turned toward the table. The manager watched, her expression humble, not out of fear, but out of changed understanding. She saw Aaliyah now, not the title, not the brand, not the position, the woman, the mother, the leader. Aaliyah laid her hand gently on the document packet, but she didn't sign yet. She looked at the manager. Her voice was soft, so soft that the quiet was what made everyone hear her. Everyone in this boutique, from this moment on, needs to be treated with dignity. Every customer, every staff member, every person who walks through that door. The manager nodded, not as compliance, but as oath. Yes, she said, I understand. Aaliyah held her gaze for a moment longer, then turned to the associate. You learned today. Keep learning. The associate swallowed hard and nodded. I will. It was real. Finally, Aaliyah picked up the pen, not dramatically, not symbolically, just naturally, as if this moment had always belonged to her. She signed. The ink dried. The room didn't cheer. It exhaled. Aaliyah handed the pen back and smoothed her dress. We're finished here, she told Malik and Nia softly. They nodded. Not to leave, to carry this with them. The boutique did not just have a new owner. It had a new standard, and everyone in the room knew it. Perfeito. Bloco 21 é onde a história se desloca para momento íntimo, fora do centro da atenção. Aqui a boutique já entendeu, e agora o foco volta para quem realmente importa. Aaliyah guided Malik and Nia toward the exit. Nothing rushed, nothing forced, just steps, steady ones. The boutique didn't watch them leave the way it had watched them enter. They didn't track their clothes or their posture or their presence. They watched them with awareness, some with humility, some with reflection, some with the quiet understanding that they had just witnessed a lesson they were never taught in school. The glass door chimed open. Warm Miami air rolled in, sun-soaked, ocean-tinted, full of salt and brightness. Outside, the world was busy again. Cars passing, laughter from a cafe, someone jogging by with headphones in. Life didn't know what had just shifted, but Malik did. He walked silently beside his mother for a few steps, his hands in his pockets, thoughtful in a way that didn't belong to boys, but to young men learning who they are. Mom, he finally said, eyes forward, voice low. When they talked to us like we didn't belong, I got mad, really mad. Aaliyah didn't interrupt. She let him speak. I wanted to say something. I wanted to yell, he continued. I wanted them to feel it. Aaliyah nodded, slow, understanding. It's normal to feel that, she said gently. Anger is not the problem. What matters is what you do with it. Malik exhaled, deep, like he had been holding that breath for days. What you did, he said slowly. It was like you didn't need to fight. But they still changed. Aaliyah smiled, not wide, but full. That's because I didn't need to prove myself. I just needed to stand in who I already was. Malik let that sink in. And then he nodded, not like a child agreeing, like a student receiving a concept he knew he'd use for the rest of his life. Nia tugged at her mother's hand, small fingers curling into Aaliyah's palm. Mommy, she said softly, does it hurt every time people look at us like that? Aaliyah stopped, not to make a dramatic moment, but because the question deserved stillness. She kneeled so she was eye-level with her daughter, the Miami breeze tugging lightly at the hem of the dress. Yes, she said honestly, sometimes it does. But it hurts less when you know the truth of who you are. Nia leaned forward and wrapped her arms around her mother's neck, not because she was sad, but because she understood, even if she didn't have all the words yet. Aaliyah held her, then slowly stood, taking both of her children's hands, one on each side. They began walking again, not away from the boutique, not away from judgment, not away from the world, into it, together, seen, rooted, unmoved. A family not defined by how the world viewed them, but by how they chose to exist inside it. They walked along the sidewalk, passing storefronts and palm-lined streets, the ocean breeze threading through the spaces between them. The world outside did not pause. Cars rolled by, music drifted from a cafe patio. A group of teenagers laughed as they crossed the street. Life continued, unaware of what had been learned in that boutique, But Malik was quiet. Too quiet. Aliyah didn't rush him. Growth does not happen when pushed. It happens when given room. After several long steps, Malik finally spoke. "Mum," he said, his voice steady but soft, "why do they look at us like that? Like we're less?" The words didn't come with tears, not anger, just the heavy clarity of recognition. Aliyah stopped again, not dramatically but with purpose. She turned to her son. He was 10, but right now he was standing at a doorway that every black child eventually reaches. Her place where innocence meets reality. She took a slow breath, one that carried the weight of generations. "Because some people were taught a story that is not true," she said. "A story that says worth is something you can see, something that comes from money or clothes or where you're from or what your skin looks like." Malik looked up at her, steady, listening. "But that story is a lie," Aliyah continued. "It was always a lie, but people forget to question the lies they were raised inside." Malik's jaw tightened, not in anger this time, but in comprehension. "So, they believe the story because they never learned another one." Aliyah smiled, a quiet, proud smile. "Yes," she said, "and today they learned a new story." Nia looked up between them, holding both their hands. "And we taught it?" she asked, eyes wide. Aliyah brushed her daughter's cheek. "Yes, baby," she said, "just by standing in who we are." The breeze lifted a loose curl from Nia's forehead. Malik looked forward again, but something was different. He didn't look smaller anymore. He looked anchored. "Mum," he said quietly, "I didn't like how I felt when they treated us that way." "You weren't supposed to," Aliyah replied. "It didn't feel right because it wasn't right. Your heart knows the truth, even when the world doesn't." Malik nodded slowly. "And next time?" he asked. Aliyah took both children's hands again. "Next time," she said, "you'll remember today, and you'll remember that we never beg for respect. We carry it." They continued walking, not past something, but into themselves. They didn't leave that boutique wounded. They left with a new language for dignity, a language they could speak anywhere. They continued walking along the sun-drenched sidewalk, the boutique now several blocks behind them. The world around them buzzed softly, distant laughter, cars passing, palm leaves rustling in the warm air. But the space between them felt still, suspended. Aliyah didn't fill the quiet. She let it settle, because silence is where understanding roots itself. Finally, Malik looked up at her. "Did something like that happen to you before?" he asked. Aliyah didn't answer right away. She stopped again, this time near a bench shaded by a tall palm, its trunk curved like a question mark. She sat and her children sat beside her, one on each side, their shoulders pressing into her arms. "Yes," she said softly, "many times." Malik didn't look surprised. He looked braced, like he already knew the answer, but needed to hear it spoken aloud. Nia rested her head against her mother's arm, silent and listening. "When I was younger," Aliyah began, her voice gentle but strong, "I worked in a sewing studio for a designer who was very well respected. I worked harder than anyone there. I stayed late. I practiced every stitch, every fold, every seam." Her hands made small motions in the air like the fabric still lived between her fingers. "But every time clients came in," she continued, "they assumed I was just the help, someone to carry things, someone invisible." Nia's small hand curled tighter against her sleeve. Malik's jaw clenched, quiet, steady anger, not out of rage, but recognition. "One day," Aliyah said, her eyes distant but warm, "a very important client came in for a custom gown. The designer couldn't get the structure right. Everyone tried and it wouldn't fall correctly. They were frustrated, embarrassed, and when no one was watching, I stepped in and adjusted the lining and the shoulder slope by hand." She smiled, just barely, and the dress came alive. Malik breathed in, slow. "What happened?" he asked. Aliyah looked at him, and the sunlight caught her eyes like something ancient and bright. "The designer took credit," she said simply, "and I stayed quiet." Nia's head lifted, eyes wide. "Why?" she whispered. "Because," Aliyah answered, "I hadn't learned yet that being right and being seen are not the same thing." The wind carried the words, slow, heavy, true. Malik leaned closer. "And now you've learned." Aliyah nodded, slow, steady, as if sealing something inside him. "Yes, and today you learned it too." They sat there, not sad, not wounded, expanded. The lesson had passed, not from a book, not from a lecture, but from living. The children didn't see the world the same way now. They saw the story beneath the surface, and they saw their mother, not just as someone strong, but as someone who had chosen how to be strong. They sat beneath the palm tree for a long moment, the city noise moving around them like a tide. People passed, lives unfolding, the world unaware that something quiet and irreversible was happening on that bench. Malik leaned back, his shoulders no longer tense, not relaxed exactly, but settled. There was weight in him now, not heaviness, but depth. "Mom," he said slowly, "when you were in that studio, did it hurt the same way it hurt today?" Aliyah looked at him, not startled, not emotional, simply open. "Yes," she said. "It hurt in the exact same way." Malik nodded, absorbing it. He wasn't asking for protection, he was asking for truth. "So what changed?" he asked. Aliyah smiled, not wide, not triumphant, but with the softness of someone who has lived and learned and remained whole. "I stopped letting the way they saw me decide who I was." Malik's chest rose slow and full, like he had been waiting for those words without knowing it. Nia shifted, sitting up, her legs tucked beneath her. "Does that mean we don't have to change for them?" she asked, voice curious, hopeful. Aliyah turned to her, warm, steady. "You never change to fit into a room," she said. "You let the room learn to make space for you." Nia's eyes glowed, bright, round, believing. Malik looked straight ahead, toward the street, the cars, the sidewalks, the buildings, the horizon beyond it. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, but sure. "I don't want to be small," he said. "I don't want to get used to hiding or shrinking or waiting for someone else to see me." Aliyah placed her hand on the back of his head, gently guiding his forehead to touch hers, an embrace that said, "I see you, exactly as you are." "You won't," she murmured, "because now you know, and once you know, you never forget." Malik closed his eyes. It wasn't dramatic, it was becoming. Nia leaned on her mother's shoulder, drawing little circles against Aliyah's arm with her fingertip, the gesture of a child who feels safe. Aliyah exhaled, slow, deep, grounding. The kind of breath you take when you realize your children are growing in real time right beside you, in the middle of an ordinary day, on a sidewalk bench, next to a boutique, just living, not fighting, not debating, not defending, becoming. The world didn't have to clap. The world didn't have to understand. They understood, and that was enough. They stood, not taller, just truer. They began walking again, leaving the shade of the palm tree behind. Miami's late afternoon light painted everything in warm gold, shadows stretching softly across the pavement. Nia skipped once, the way children naturally do when their hearts feel lighter. Malik walked with his hands in his pockets, steps measured, thoughtful, older. Aliyah walked between them, not leading, not following, with. They reached a crosswalk just as the light changed. A man stood waiting there, middle-aged, dressed in a light button-down shirt and linen pants, holding a to-go coffee cup. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't scrolling his phone. He was simply present, the way people are when they've learned to watch the world. He looked at Aliyah first. Not the dress, not the jewelry, not the posture. He looked at her eyes. Then he looked at the children. And something gentle moved across his face. Not recognition of fame, but recognition of presence. "You all right?" he asked, not with concern, but with respect. The kind that comes from seeing dignity and wanting to acknowledge it. Aliyah nodded. "We're all right." The man smiled. "Small, real. That's good," he said. "The world can be loud sometimes. You walked like you remembered who you are." Malik blinked. Nobody had heard their conversation. Nobody from the boutique had followed them. Nobody had explained what happened, but the man had seen it anyway. Malik stepped forward, voice quiet. "How did you know?" The man tapped his heart with 2 fingers, then his temple. "I've lived long enough to recognize the moment someone chooses themselves," he said, "and I saw the 3 of you walking in that choice." Nia tilted her head, curiosity blooming. "So, you didn't see us before?" The man shook his head with a gentle laugh. "No, I saw you now. And now is the only part that matters." Aliyah felt her breath settle, not from relief but from affirmation. She smiled, a soft smile, warm and open. "Thank you," she said. The man tipped his coffee cup in a small salute. "No need to thank me. You did the work," he replied. The crosswalk light changed. The man stepped forward, but turned once more, offering just one more thought, as easy as air. "Hold on to days like this. They build who you become." And then he continued on, disappearing into the motion of the city. The world was moving again, but they were moving differently inside it. Malik looked up at his mother, eyes calm. "Yeah," he murmured. "I'll remember today." And he would, because today he learned how to walk in his name. As the sun dipped lower, painting buildings in warm amber and soft coral, Aaliyah and her children found themselves walking along the same street they had started from. The boutique was still there, glass shining, mannequins still dressed, doors still open. The same, and yet completely changed. Not because the building was different, but because they were. Malik stopped first. He looked through the window, not hiding, not shrinking, just looking. Inside, the manager was speaking quietly with the associate, their postures different now, softer, humbled, human. Aaliyah followed her son's gaze, but she felt no pull, no anger, no ache of what had happened inside. No need to re-enter and reclaim what had already been reclaimed. Some wounds try to rewrite your steps, but today's lesson had changed that. Nia tugged Aaliyah's hand gently. "Do we need to go back inside?" she asked. Aaliyah smiled, a real smile, the kind that starts in the heart and reaches the eyes without effort. "No," she said, "we don't need anything from that room anymore." Malik exhaled, the release of something deep. "We didn't leave anything behind," he said. Aaliyah nodded. "Exactly." They continued walking, right past the boutique, not rushed, not avoiding, simply moving forward. And as they did, Malik glanced up at his mother. "Mom," he said, his voice steady, "I think I understand something now." Aaliyah looked at him, ready. "No place can decide who we are," he said. "We decide if a place deserves us." Aaliyah felt her breath catch, not from surprise, but from recognition. He had not only understood the lesson, he had claimed it. She rested her hand on the back of his head, proud, strong, full. "Yes," she said. "That's it." Nia squeezed her mother's palm twice, the secret little gesture she always did when she felt safe, and Aaliyah squeezed back, twice. They crossed the street. The boutique faded behind them. The city opened in front of them, wide, warm, endless. Not a world to endure, a world to walk through, a world that would learn to make room, one step at a time. They didn't win, they became. If you made it to the end of this story, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from? Which city? Which country? I truly want to know how far this story traveled, and whose heart it reached today. And tell me, on a scale of 0 to 10, what did this story make you feel? Not just think, but feel. Your comment helps this story find more people who need to hear it. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, stories about dignity, love, strength, and the quiet ways we rise, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with someone who carries a strong heart. Thank you for being here. This story was made for you.